Take us back to Michael Franzese when he was a boy and when you found out that Pops was part of a mob family.
Yeah, we grew up in a section of Brooklyn called Greenpoint, Williamsburg area. My dad was one of 19 kids, so we kind of controlled the whole neighborhood because everybody knew my grandfather was a pretty popular guy. He had a bakery in town there. And, my dad was such a high-profile figure that the first I remember of seeing something different with my dad, I was probably 3 years old. And I didn't know this at the time, but there was a war going on in the Colombo family. My dad had been gone for a couple of days. He wasn't around, right? Then all of a sudden he comes into the house and one of his guys was out on the porch that we had there. And he was kind of like standing guard. Now I understand what it was. My dad had a heavy beard. He came in, he hugged my mother. And then he came over to me. I was sitting on the steps, just watching all of this. He hugged me. And then he disappeared again for a couple of days. But that's vivid in my mind. I didn't understand why that was going on at the time. Nobody explained it to me. But again, there was a war in our family, and my dad was, an active participant in that. So that struck me early on. I never questioned it. I never asked about it. But, I'm 74 now, and I still remember that vividly. And then, my dad, he was such a high-profile figure. He was kind of like the John Gotti of his day, constantly in the media. Law enforcement was constantly around us. My dad was getting arrested. So, I knew this from the time I was a young kid. Then you hear people talking. You don't understand exactly what it is. You don't pick it up right away. But then it all starts to come together. And then, of course, he gets arrested. He's away. He's in jail. We're visiting him. So this happened early on in my life.
So what about mom? Because they talk about the mob bosses, the captains, the soldiers being part of a mafia, being made men. What was it like for mom knowing that, my husband is involved in certain activities that may get him killed one day?
Well, early on, I didn't have that discussion with my mother, but obviously she loved my father. And, I think we all grew up the same way or all had that same feeling. I hated law enforcement, hated them, only because my dad was my idol. He was a great father. I loved my dad. And I saw law enforcement around as harassing our family all the time, and going after my dad. And because my dad, one thing he never did, many things I respect about him, he never brought what was going on in the outside world into the house. He didn't talk about it. He didn't badmouth it. He didn't do anything. We were just a family in the house. So everything I knew from observation. And back then, my dad's under surveillance from 7 or 8 different agencies, and they would have their cars parked around my house 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Wherever we would go, we had a parade of law enforcement vehicles following us. So right away, they were the enemy. I hated them. And I think my mom had the same feeling, because it's our husbands, my dad, we loved him. And we didn't, it's funny that you say this because my daughters do a podcast. And one of the questions they were asked, did you ever see Dad? You watch the movies. People die in that life. People kill people. Do you ever see your dad doing something like that? And they were both like, I don't know if I can see my father doing that, So for me, it was kind of the same thing. This is my dad. Come on. He doesn't do anything wrong, until I got older and understood a little bit more. But it was just so much part of our life. It was just normal.
All right, my friends, now I'm making you an offer that you really shouldn't refuse. Our fruit wines, our blackberry, our cherry, our strawberry, and our pomegranate, we're making them available for the holidays. You can only get them online. They're flying off the shelves. Nobody has these. They're unique. And you know what? They pair differently with different foods. Every one of them are great. But right now, limited quantity. Go online, either click on the link or go to franzesewine.com. We're going to make them available for you for the holidays. We're so proud of these wines, really. Not only the taste, but the way people are enjoying them. You're going to use the bottle to put flowers in afterwards. You're going to make a vase out of it. Maybe a candle. People are showing me pictures. They're really loving it. Get your order in for the holidays. They're in limited supply. An offer that you shouldn't refuse.
Do you think
were your kids around when you were involved in the mob, or
my
your
kids
weren't born yet?
I was married. My wife and I married 40 years, but I was married for a short time, and I had 3 children in 3 years. So they were involved. They were around when I was involved. I got arrested many times with them there, even though they were younger. So they understood what was going on. So, I mean, you have to catch the vibe. You can't not know, when you see everything happening around you.
But then you have total of 7 kids, right?
I have 7 kids now.
Then the 4 others were never.
Well, they were because I was in prison,
right?
During that time, and they visited me for 8 years.
Okay.
So, except for my youngest daughter, she was born when I finally got out of prison, and I was home for about 2 years. My wife got pregnant; she was born, so she never experienced that. But she's the only one out of the 7. The other 6 all went through it.
Do you think if you weren't your father's son, you would have been kind of reeled into the mob life?
No, definitely not. I was, I was kind of a normal kid. I mean, I played sports in school. My dad wanted me to be a doctor. I was, I had my sights set on becoming a doctor. I was a pre-med student for 2 years in college. So I wouldn't have gone. I never aspired to be a mob guy. It wasn't my, if you would have said to me, back when I was a kid, what do you want to do when you grow up? I want to play center field for the New York Yankees. Mickey Mantle was my idol back then. So I never had any aspirations of being involved in that life. Never.
What kind of, I want to say, dragged you into it at that point?
Simple. My dad, who was indicted twice in the state of New York for very serious crimes, 3 times actually, grand larceny and murder. He goes to trial. He gets acquitted. But then he's indicted again in 1966 for masterminding a nationwide string of bank robberies by the feds. He gets convicted and he sentenced him to 50 years, 5-0. So I was a pre-med student at that time. I was 19 years old. And I went to visit my dad in Leavenworth Penitentiary. And I said to him, Dad, bank robbery. He said, son, I'm no bank robber. I was framed on this case. I'm innocent. I don't rob banks. And my dad never lied to me, so I believed him. So I said, well, you're going to spend 50 years? It's a death sentence. You're 50 years old now. Long story short, Joe Colombo, who was the boss of our family, he kind of took me under his wing. I knew the family well. And I started to meet a lot of my dad's friends. And they said, Mike, if you don't help your father, he's going to die in prison. So I lose interest in school. And that's when I visited my dad in Leavenworth. I said, Dad, if I don't help you out, you're going to die in here. And we had a very deep conversation in the visiting room. And look, I don't like to talk about this a lot, but, you fellas have been great in coming out here. He said to me, if you're going to be on the street, I want you on the street the right way. He said, and the right way is to become a member of my life. So he looked at me and he said, I got to ask you one question, and it's going to mean a lot as to how we go forward with this. I said, what? He said, if you ever had to kill somebody, could you do it? No, never involved in anything like that. And I thought about it for a minute. I said, yeah, Dad, under the right conditions, right circumstances, yeah, I could do it.
And how old are you at this time?
I was 20. And he said, that's the right answer. He said, go home, somebody will be in touch with you, do whatever you're told. And that's when he proposed me for membership into the life. You can't just come in, you can't just meet somebody and say, I'd like to join. What do I have to do? Somebody has to propose you, vouch for you. So my father knew me. He knew I had it in me, my dad, so he knew me well. And that's when he made that decision, and I accepted it.